Cops, what is the most suspicious thing you've ever caught somebody doing for a totally legitimate reason? Story 1. Not a cop story, but I guess I was definitely suspicious. I had just moved into a new apartment and I had no tools. So I decided that during my lunch break I would go to Home Depot, buy a hammer so I could finally hang some frames, and grab a quick lunch in the food court. Home Depot is inside the mall. Long story short, my country had just gotten rid of plastic bags that week, so of course, that's how I ended up walking around a big crowded mall with a hammer in my hand and nothing else. It was a quick thing, so I didn't bring a backpack, and before this point I never noticed the lack of packaging on hammers. Of course, people start staring, and somebody tells one of the mall security guards about me. The guard stops me, I tell him the story, and he lets me go. I go to the second floor. The same happens. I go to the third floor, and now a group of mall security guards start walking behind me, but without making contact. By then, I had lost the receipt, or another one of the guards kept it, dunno. I knew they were going to keep harassing me, so I decided to leave the mall and head back to work without lunch. An hour later, I heard one of my coworkers telling the story that something had happened at the mall. Something about a lunatic walking around the mall with a hammer. Too long didn't read. I walked around a mall holding a hammer, and security didn't believe me that I had just bought the damn thing. I think that kind of depends on how he was holding the hammer. If he was just holding the handle of it just at his side, like wielding it, like he's some sort of character in an old school Sega Genesis beat 'em up, that might be suspicious. Maybe if he had his hands around the metal part and letting the handle hang down like it was some sort of, like he was just sort of carrying it utilitarian-like, maybe he wouldn't have been harassed as much. I think he was just holding it by the handle. Story 2. Mine is more a reverse situation. Off-duty police officer caught doing something sus by a sieve. My boyfriend at the time had locked his keys in his car, so I texted my dad, now retired police officer, while I was at school to ask him how to get them out, thinking he'd give me the numbers of some local companies or something. He texted me back asking where the car was parked, so I assumed he was organizing the service on my then-boyfriend's behalf because we were in school, so couldn't make the calls ourselves. About 30 minutes go by, and one of our friends from school who had a free period that morning texts my then-boyfriend to say he saw some big burly dude breaking into his car, but he didn't want to call the police because the dude caught a good look at him and the car he was driving, and he was nervous he'd track him down or something. 10 minutes later, we found out that big burly dude happened to be my dad, when he texted me to say he'd dropped my then-boyfriend's car keys to the front office. He'd managed to find a thin, hard plastic rope-type thing in one of the bins near where the car was parked, used it to slide between the window seal and yank up the door lock. Having to explain to my friends, word got out pretty fast that my then-boyfriend's car was being broken into, that it was actually my dad breaking into the car to help him get out the keys that he locked inside. It was one of the weirdest conversations I've ever had, but it gave my dad some pretty wild street cred. I was wondering if anyone was going to say, as soon as they found out it was her dad that broke into the car, that maybe this retired police officer dad was suspecting the boyfriend of something and was going through it for evidence. So I wouldn't put it past anybody to think that. Story 3. Here we go. Not an officer, but I got a story. I had driven a customer home in her own car, a beautiful brand new BMW, because she was afraid to drive at night. I asked her if she had any family that could help, and she said no. I told her to wait for my break, and I'd ask another employee to follow us in my car so I could get home after. Well, driving towards her home, I was pulled over by the police. I was asked to step out of the car and was escorted to the sidewalk. There were 4 cruisers within a mile all around us. I heard one of the officers asking her if she was okay and if I had hurt her. The officer questioning me asked why I was driving her home and how I planned to get back. I told him the story, pointed to my friend who was pulled over and said, "That's my car." He then asked why I was so nervous, and I replied that I've never been approached by so many officers in such a way. Then I asked what was going on, and he told me that her daughter reported her car stolen because she never stays out that late. When her daughter showed up, she was unfriendly and didn't apologize or say thank you. Then her mother started yelling at her about how she treated her like a child. Apparently, she started showing signs of dementia, but still drove to our place a couple of times a week. Didn't see her again after that night. She was such a sweet woman, and I felt so bad it all ended like that. I got to go back to work and hope no one asked me to do something like that again. I swear that one part where he's asked, "Well, why are you nervous?" "Because you've got all the police force pulling me over. Of course I'm going to be suspicious of you." I don't care where you fall on how you think about cops and law enforcement and what they get away with these days. If you've got more than 2 cops that are pulled over facing you when they're asking you something, you're going to be nervous, even if you've done nothing. Story 4. I guess mine isn't so bad. I was the suspect. Back in the early 2000s, I bought a PSP on release day and loaded some MP3 files to it. Walking to work on a long stretch, I pulled my PSP to start some music and slipped it right back into my pocket. 15 minutes into my walk, LAPD swarmed me with guns pointed at me and asked me to get on the ground. I think I was 19 at the time. I got on the ground and one officer dug his knee into my back and asked me if I was carrying any weapons. I said no. He said that a lady had reported me with a weapon in hand. I paused for a moment and then said, I have a PSP in my pocket. Maybe she thought that was a gun?" The cop said nothing for like 5 seconds and went right into my pocket and pulled out my PSP. He asked me if I was dealing illicit substances, and I said, "What? No. Why?" He had been scrolling on my machine, wondering what Metal Gear Acid was. Eventually, they let me get up and explain that it was a PlayStation Portable. I just remembered them knocking themselves backwards laughing and driving away without apologizing for my aching back. Story 5. Not a cop, but was stopped by one. Junior year of college. I was taking a biology class where we had to do a phylum project. Go out and gather like 15 different organisms across 15 different phylums. This involved a lot of rooting through bushes for bugs and stuff and throwing them in a big Ziploc bag. So naturally, I was rooting around in bushes on campus. Only problem, it was like 1 a.m. I'm a night person, what can I say? So I'm out with a flashlight, darting in and out of bushes, hoisting around this big old Ziploc bag full of random unidentifiable stuff. Car drives by just as I jump into a set of bushes to grab what looks like a type of cup fungus on a tree. Come back out to find a cop car stopped there and a guy shining his flashlight on me. I apparently looked pretty suspicious. Literally, my first words to the cop were, "Wow, this probably looks really sketch, doesn't it?" Told him about my project. He laughed because he thought I was smuggling a literal Ziploc gallon bag full of illicit substances or something dumb like that. Had a good laugh, wished me good luck, and left me to my bush diving. That was a fun night. Story 6. Too long didn't read? It was Brussels sprouts. I'm the guy who was doing something suspicious, but it kind of fits here. When I used to work at a grocery store, I would get off sometime between 10 p.m. and 12 a.m., and I also preferred to ride my bike most of the year to save on gas. Since work was close to my home and there were a few cars out, I never really bothered with lights. Already suspicious, I know. Right around Thanksgiving, we would get these massive stalks of Brussels sprouts, which, if you have never seen one, they look like something you might find growing on an alien planet. A solid 3 feet of little bulbs at the end of spikes, basically. They were super cheap, so I couldn't pass up such a deal. But of course, the only way for me to transport it home at night was to ride with the stock sticking a foot out of my backpack. I have no idea what the cops thought it was when they pulled me over. Marijuana? A weapon? They were doing their deal where no one talks to me and the other checks me out from behind when the other one behind me busted out laughing. "Are those Brussels sprouts?" They let me go a minute later. I've biked to work. I've ridden back late at night, and I would take the back streets, and I also wouldn't use a light. And then I got pulled over by a cop saying that was illegal unless I was on the sidewalk or something like that. So, long story short, I got a light so I wouldn't get pulled over by cops on back streets anymore. Story 7. Not a cop, but I'm reminded of a story. When he was 16 or so, my brother and his friends would do some absolutely stupid things. One day, they were walking through the local grocery store and saw that cases of Teenies, also called Hugs, Lil Jugs, Quarter Waters, were on sale at a huge discount. They decided to have a Teenie-drinking contest and bought several cases. So there they are in the parking lot of a Stop and Shop. They have the cases stacked in the open trunk of a car and have formed into a circle, where they're now cheering the combatants on as 2 people at a time try to chug the most Teenies in 2-minute matches. Kids 2-fisting Teenie jugs, breaking foil caps and pounding these juices, and then crushing the plastic jugs on their foreheads and throwing them on the ground and going for the next juice. And during this idiocy, a cop car pulls up. The cop gets out and sees a group of teenage boys crushing plastic jugs of something, screaming like idiots. Several kids have puked red/purple-colored liquid on the parking lot. He obviously thinks they have booze and starts giving them the riot act. At this point, the officer is informed that the kids have no booze on them, that all they have is juice, and that they were overcome with thirst. The police officer eventually realized they were telling the sort of truth and ordered them all to clean up their mess and then head home. Story 8. At around 2 a.m. on a weeknight, I see a guy bolt from a house in a quiet residential burglary hotspot. His face is covered, he's wearing sunglasses or something similar, and the kind of dark clothing you catch burglars in. As I follow him and start to shout up on the radio, the cars parked between us clear to reveal he is running on a lead behind the tiniest dog I've ever seen. A clearly uncontrollable pooch that is having the time of its life. I just kept going. Edit. Some clarification. The dog was on a lead. He was stopping to snuff at lampposts. It wasn't dog napping. The man was running as he was trying to keep up with the dog while letting it go at the pace it wanted to. He ran from the house, but the front door was closed. Doglet took off when they hit the pavement. When I got a closer look, the glasses were tinted, not sunglasses. I don't know why he had his face covered. It was a scarf and it was autumn, but we don't have sumptuary laws in our country and you can wear what you like. I'm not the fashion police. I spoke to him when I saw him later on, but I don't remember the dog's name, sorry. Further edit. It wasn't an expensive dog. It was a cheap dog. Cheap dogs have more fun, I reckon. Story 9. This is from the other side, not the cops. But this is my favorite story about my grandpa. He worked in a factory and often worked overtime, meaning he would be going into work around 3 a.m. This is rural Wisconsin, in farmland, and the neighbors down the road happen to own llamas. So it's early morning, still dark, and the neighbor's fence broke and the llamas got out. And my grandma ended up hitting and unaliving one with his truck. Being the responsible citizen that he is, he calls it in to the police. Now, the police hear I hit a llama at 3 a.m. and think my grandpa is some drunk coming home from the bar who hit a deer and doesn't know what he's talking about. The cop comes out fully expecting to arrest my grandpa and put him in a cell to sleep it off. Imagine his shock when he gets to the scene and sees an unalived llama on the side of the road and a large llama fur-covered dent in my sober grandpa's truck. In fact, he was so surprised he got on his radio back to the station and says, "Holy hell, you guys, he really did hit a llama." I still can't see a llama to this day without thinking of my now-gone grandpa and smiling about this story. I think I want to hear the reaction of people on the other end of that radio. I can just imagine an old town with like the policemen that are on duty but hanging around at the police station, just hanging around the radio and then just laughing their heads off when this guy says, "Holy hell, you guys, he really did hit a lamb." I wonder what they talked about when he got back to the station. Story 10. Not the cop, but the guy stopped. I had a project for a forensic anthropology class. We had to study the decomposition of an animal, and the best way to do that is fresh roadkill, of course. So part of our assignment was to go find some fresh roadkill and scoop it up, bring it home, and observe it. It's about 2 a.m. I'm out with my girlfriend, and we find this big, fresh, snapping turtle on a country road near a river. We pull over. We've got plastic bins lined with garbage bags. I'm putting on my gloves and getting the shovel, and I make a joke about how funny it would be for a car to drive by and see this. Not a minute later, a car pulls up behind us and stops. Then the spotlight comes on. Yep, state trooper, confused as hell as 2 college students are putting this fresh mess in a bin. I'm nervous, laughing, super awkward, trying to explain that this is for a school project and I'm not some weirdo. He starts laughing, asks if I'm from College with Professor. I am. And it's for her class that I'm collecting these sad remains of a slow animal. Turns out, before becoming a state trooper, he had the same assignment. So he helped me scoop up the turtle and told me to tell the professor he said hello. Too long didn't read? Cop pulls me over while I'm picking up roadkill for a school assignment. He had the same school assignment a few years before. Story 11. Not a cop, but feel this applies. When I was still in college, I had a bunch of friends over for a night of video games and Dungeons and Dragons. We bought a huge case of Mountain Dew, none of us were drinkers, and stayed up pretty late because of it. The house I lived in back then was really awful, and our AC went out all the time. This was one such night. We had a table on our front porch. One of my roommates liked to collect free furniture from people's yards, so we decided to move our game to the front porch. We played for a few hours and hear a voice call out from the driveway. We looked over to see a police car had pulled in. The officer pulled his flashlight and started shining it at us. I wonder what went through his head when he saw a group of nerdy college kids with a total ton of empty Mountain Dew cans on the porch. Apparently, a neighbor had called the cops for a noise complaint. We didn't realize it was 4 a.m. Moments later, the neighbor came out and told the officer that she had called about a different house. There was a satellite frat or something down the street, and the officer thought it was us. He gave a hogwash excuse about still being in violation and gave me a warning, as I was the only resident of the home, before taking off to live with the actual party animals. I still like to tell people our D&D sessions are rowdy enough to get the police involved. Story 12. Not me, but a friend of mine. We're in high school, and my brother invites a bunch of his friends over to the house. These guys are kind of hyperactive and a lot of fun to be around. Anyway, en route to the house, one of our friends gets lost. Up until about 2 years ago, most GPS systems had our address swapped with one down the street, so our buddy ends up at the wrong house. He's driving very slowly around the neighborhood in a very old black sedan from the 80s. Kind of like a Monte Carlo, but not a sports car, and way trashier. He calls us up saying he thinks he has the wrong place. We correct him. He finds our house and everything is square. Well, 20 minutes later, the doorbell rings. Our 3 friends, being silly, dive to the floor with a cry of, "It's the police! Get down!" Our mother answers the door, and lo and behold, it's actually the police. They're responding to a call about a suspicious vehicle by one of our neighbors. After explaining, the officer just left, no harm done, and we immediately started laughing about the whole thing. How much you want to bet this was a very upscale suburban neighborhood? Because the cop just left after it was being explained. If this was in some sort of inner city or urban area, this cop would have gotten nervous and probably called for backup after they were joking around and saying, "Hit the floor, it's the cops." What do you think? Story 13. I'm the perp in this scenario. So I'm not the best person at looking after their keys. I've broken into every house I live in at least twice. One particular flat happened to be next door to the local police station on a busy road. I got home from work about 11 p.m. and once again realized that I don't have my keys. As I'm a kitchen porter, my uniform is entirely black. I decided to attempt the front window as I know it's the easiest to jimmy, so I pile up a few bins and work my way up to this precarious ledge. I hear a little cough behind me, and half the station have piled out to watch my progress. This being England, the coppers are all sarcastic as hell and essentially telling me exactly what I'm doing, breaking into my own home, as if it's an obvious excuse that they don't believe. I then have to sit there waiting for the landlord, a family friend, to drive down in his jammies to confirm that I'm the legitimate tenant. After the confusion was cleared up, the cops cracked out a set of ladders to help me back in and said to call round to borrow them if it happens again. So that was the time the cops helped me break in. Still not the most risky break I had to do in my time.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 14. Not a cop, but a funny story. For a while in high school, instead of rolling people's houses, we would breed them instead. Basically, the local bread store would throw out all of their out-of-date bread. We would go by in a pickup truck and sometimes fill the bed over the cabs with bread. One night we did just that and made it all of about a half-mile from the store before a cop car started following us. 2 of us in the cab and 2 others balancing in the back of the bed, filled with about 500 loaves of bread. We turn right, the cops turn right. We turn left, the cops turn left. And then hits the lights. He walks up to the truck and sees that it's overflowing with bread. He asks the obvious question, "What are you boys doing with all this bread?" Without missing a beat, my friend looks at him and smiles. "Officer, we're going to feed the ducks." The cop laughs his butt off, goes back to his car to determine if the bread has been stolen, which of course it was not. He says, "I'm not sure what you boys are up to, but if you follow me to the nearest dumpster and then head home, I think we can call it a night." Story 15. Friend's story. Not a cop at the time, though he is now. He had a job as a horse-drawn carriage driver. He had the top hat, stupid coat, a twirly mustache, and a knife. The knife was because the horse pulling you and your fiancé through freaking downtown Chicago on a Saturday in summer is a retired Amish draft horse. All those ponies were old. And if you hit a pothole in the capital of such things, Pritzker, please use the weed money for the road, okay? Thanks. You had to put old Silver down right there. So you can make fun of the uniform, but all of those nerds LARPing as lesser cousins to landed gentry are carrying blades. Buddy comes off his shift and takes his pink bike to a Dunkin' Donuts and chows down on that 3 a.m. egg sandwich. Cops come in and both notice him. A takedown, search a backpack, and finding the knife. And walk through booking later, he finds himself in a cell. Not until morning, when they're giving him his shoes back, does he find out why the sleepover. A local DJ had been stabbed and unalived at a nearby house party by a guy with a twirly mustache who rode away on a pink bike. Story 16. Recently, I was conducting an S-18 house search on a guy we'd arrested in a local club with loads of illicit substances on him. In his room, I found an oversized, out-of-place vase with false flowers in them. Suspicion raised. I took the flowers out, and in the bottom, I saw what I believed to be a balaclava. Here we go. I took it out, unfolded it, and it turned out to be a jumper for a small dog. I look in the vase again. I see a blue velvet drawstring bag. I manipulate it slightly, and it rustles, with a feeling of lots of little packets inside. I remove it slowly, open the bag, and inside are some retro Scrabble pieces. The hell? We didn't find any further illicit substances in his room. We did, however, find a big takeoff-sized machete under his mattress wrapped up in a tea towel, so that was interesting. Still confused AF about the contents of that vase, though. Story 17. Son of a cop. My dad told me about a time back in the 80s. My father was sitting in his cruiser around the corner from a bar. A car drives by, swerving a little with exhaust coming from the tailpipe. signifying a recently started vehicle. Pulls the guy over. Smells alcohol on the driver, while also noticing a large staff in the back seat. He has the driver step out, then inquires about the staff. The driver tells my dad, "I'm a black belt in Kung Fu. I use it in class." So my father, unconvinced, asked him to demonstrate his proficiency with the staff, while proving his sobriety in a sort of impromptu field sobriety test. The driver puts on a little show for Dad on the side of the road. Dad's enjoying the show, but starts to hear sirens coming from all directions. A passerby had seen my dad on the side of the road in a face-off with a crazy man and a stick. Thinking my dad was in need of help, the passerby called the cops. Apparently, my dad had been so wrapped up in the show, he had not heard the radio calls for him. So dispatch sent all available units to his rescue. Passerby thought my dad was getting butt-kicked by a ninja. Story 18. Our shift supervisor stops at a light next to a naked guy on a motorcycle. The light turned green. The boss got behind him and hit the lights. The guy wouldn't stop. A pursuit was called and a few of us joined. He led us a mile or two outside of town, pulled into a long driveway, and immediately got prone and profusely apologized. He's completely sober and terrified. He lost a bet and had to make the block on a bike while in the buff. He wasn't familiar with the area and found himself at a lonely stoplight with the only cop in that district. He wasn't completely sure where we stopped him, so we gave him directions and sent him on his way back to the party in a borrowed cop raincoat. Story 19. I was sitting with another officer in a parking lot watching traffic in a shady area of town known for lots of illicit substance activity at 10 p.m. We were parked in the shadows. A car rolls into a nearby parking lot, followed shortly by another car. They are at the rear of the lot behind a business. Both guys exit their cars, and one guy has a paper bag in his hand. The two guys approach each other, and I hear from across the parking lot, "I told you I'd come through. This stuff is fresh as hell, yo." My buddy and I roll up, hoping to have interrupted a hard rock sale. The two gentlemen appear horrified and consent to being searched. Inspection of the bag revealed 3 peaches that were indeed fresh as hell. Story 20. The first one that comes to mind for me. Late at night, I saw a dude hauling copper pipe out of a local grocery store after it closed down. Copper theft at the time was super common, so I thought I had a burglary in progress. I stop out, get ready for an easy arrest, ask him what he's doing. He says he was hired to clean the place out. Ask why he's taking the copper. Owner told him that his payment was the copper piping. Since it wasn't going to be a grocery store after, they didn't need it. I didn't buy it for a minute. Hogwash detector was screaming at this point. So I find the owner in our records, call him, and sure as hell, dude was hired to clean the place out and was paid in copper pipe. That was their agreement. But then I asked why he was out at 2 a.m., since it was super suspicious. Since the place closed down, there was no AC. As it was the middle of summer, 2 a.m. was the best way to do it and keep cool. Story 21. Patrolling a military housing neighborhood, I had noticed a suspicious van parked around the area over the past few nights. Always in a different spot, so I could never catch it coming or going. So around the 5th night of this, I hide my car and wait. Sure enough, the van rolls through. I waited a few minutes before following. Turn the corner and light up 3 guys rummaging through all the trash cans left on the street. Turns out they were part of CID. Think NCIS, the show, but Army version. They suspected someone in the area was cooking Walter White crystals and were going through the garbage cans to find discarded ingredients. I only found this out after getting chewed out after they called my supervisors. I still don't feel bad. No one told me. Story 22. Correctional officer here. 3 years ago, I was working in a high-security, high-risk unit in the middle of the night. The control room came over the radio when I was doing my rounds in one of the 4 pods. Somebody popped out of their cell in B pod. This led to myself and 3 other guys suiting up in extraction gear and getting ready for the worst. We rushed to B pod to get the inmate under control and cuffed. While we were doing so, we observed smoke billowing out of the cell the inmate came from. Still have no clue how an unburnable cell caught fire but it started inside the walls. Story 23. Not a cop, but the suspect. There were a bunch of people at my buddy's house in high school, and we got bored, so we went to Walmart, bought some badminton equipment, and made our way to the park where there's a net. We had 3 cars, and I was in the lead, so I pulled into the lot, and there's like 6 cop cars in the parking lot for some kind of sting. I don't know. Me, being a dumb high schooler, I want a GTFO and slowly reverse back out of the park. It looked suspicious as hell, so one of the cops followed me and pulled me over, saying I didn't signal a turn, which was hogwash because I was being followed by a cop, so obviously I'd used it, and asked to look through my car. I said yes because we didn't have anything on us at all, and lo and behold, he finds a bunch of badminton stuff. So I guess it was odd for him because even though it wasn't illegal, it must have been weird to find 8 teenagers going to play badminton at 1 a.m. Story 24. Actual cop here, too. Nothing major, but one night I came across a pickup truck parked behind a small business, backed up to the dumpster. Guy is next to the truck emptying out trash from the bed of the truck and throwing it into the dumpster. Figured it was someone illegally dumping their junk in someone else's dumpster to avoid having to go to the landfill. Make contact with the guy, who says he owns the business and that he's renovating his home, but ran out of room in his dumpster there. He comes back listed as the contact/key holder for the business, and the truck he was driving was registered to the business, so it was all good. Not exciting, I know. Story 25. I'm the person that was doing something suspicious for a totally legit reason. Back in college, my female roommate and one of her female friends got in a rough patch, and things boiled over at the local dive bar. They were outside to hash things out, and I saw she left her purse behind. I paid both our tabs with my own money and brought her purse outside to give it to her. Well, I guess they made up, and their way of celebrating was running through the street yelling at the top of their lungs. So I tried to catch up to them without thinking how it looked. 2 drunk girls running and screaming down the street, while I, a drunk 6 foot 1 inch, 200-pound bearded man, is chasing after them with a purse in hand. Story 26. Found a guy parked behind a middle school around 5:30 a.m. on a weekday morning during the school's winter break, so no one should be there. He didn't have much of an excuse as to why he was there, but nothing else was out of place and he wasn't wanted. It wasn't until he drove away and I looked around where his car was parked and I found out what he was doing. He had taken a massive dump that was just sitting on top of the snow, still steaming. Made me laugh so hard all I could do was kick snow over it and go 10-8. Available for calls. Oh man, I have IBS, and the worst is having an emergency where nothing is open. After the first couple of times, I now carry stuff in the car to make a makeshift. Story 27. Prior U.S. Coast Guard. We were doing a security boarding on a vessel planning on entering port with some hazardous cargo. Me and one other guy are in the engine room making sure everything is kosher when we catch a glimpse of some boots barely sticking out from under a piece of machinery. Since as far as we knew, all crew were present and accounted for above deck, we were understandably concerned. We radio up asking about it, get told all present and accounted for up above. So we're thinking of stowaways or someone being smuggled. Luckily, it was neither. Just a dude who legit fell asleep while doing some maintenance. He shared a name with one of the other crew, so that's how we missed his absence. Apparently they, our guy up above, checked the same guy twice. Go fig. Story 28. My cousin is a cop and told us the story of seeing a car drive slowly at about 3 a.m. through a neighborhood that had had several break-ins. He thinks to himself that they're looking for a target, so he puts on his lights and pulls them over. He walks up, and the driver puts the window down, and she turns to look at him with fire in her eyes and says in a harsh whisper, "This had better be important because I just got the baby to sleep." He looks in the back, and there's a baby in a car seat, sound asleep. The memory of what it was like when his babies wouldn't sleep rushes back, and he says, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Never mind," and goes back to his car. She drives away slowly. He's just glad he didn't wake the baby. Story 29. So I used to live in a pretty awful part of town in Georgia. One morning around 2 or 3, The dog is acting all crazy like he's got to get outside right now. I grab my shoes and the leash and take him out and down the block. It was a particularly quiet night for the area. Suddenly, I realize that there's a car creeping down the street with the lights off. I start to feel some anxiety because shootings are not uncommon in the area. I get the dog close and hang out by a tree, keeping it between me and the car. As the car starts to pass, I peek out and see George's finest officer inside, playing solitaire on his unit's laptop in the middle of night, no lights on, while driving. I was really relieved at first, then ticked. Sorry for the M. Night Shyamalan twists there. Story 30. Celebrated Midsummer last night and was the driver for my group of friends. Midsummer is a really big holiday in Sweden with a lot of alcohol being consumed. So naturally, there are a lot of police working and a lot of DUI charges. I had just dropped 2 of my friends off and had just turned the car around when my mate pointed out the police car chilling in a pocket down the road. We didn't think much of them as we didn't do anything illegal, but once I got onto a bigger road, I noticed red and blue lights in my mirror. Turns out that they saw me turn around and figured I was trying to run away from them. Story 31. 3 a.m. on a weeknight, and I pull up behind a car at a light. The light is green and the car is stopped, but running. Foot was on the brake. Light turns red, so I wait behind him. Light turns green again, and this dude isn't moving. So my partner and I quietly exit our vehicle and approach him. He was completely passed out, asleep, with the car in drive. We woke him up and talked to him to make sure he wasn't drunk, and he was just tired because his wife had a baby a few days ago and needed him to run to the store for something. That newborn sleep deprivation is real. Story 32. I was the only one on the block that didn't come out of the house after a neighbor was shot with an AK-47 at about 4:45 a.m. So my house was suspicious. The cops came over and banged on the door. They thought it was me. I slept through the whole thing. Took the cops quite a while to wake me up. I had no alibi. My roommate slept through it too. Kind of weird. Story 33. I'm on the other side of this. I was picking my wife up from work late-ish one night when my daughter was a baby. I was driving around the parking lot because she would stay asleep as long as the car was moving. I was kind of early, so I circled for a while. Long enough to attract the attention of someone that called the cops because someone was prowling the parking lot. Cop rolled in and stopped me. My daughter woke up, and the cop had a good laugh when he found out what was going on.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.